aren't part of TSM, we're just here visiting. Okay, a whole bunch of people. Okay, cool. Okay, so it's like a mixed sort of crowd, which is great. All right, okay, so we're good to go. Hi, my name's Gaurav. I'm part of the faculty here, the pro faculty here at TSM. I'm mainly teaching obviously music production 1.1, 1.2 this trimester, I guess, and a couple modules for year 2 of pro, which namely are electronic music production 1, 2, and arranging contemporary styles. So welcome to this masterclass. Well, the masterclass, a very loose term because, as I can gauge, there's a bunch of 1.1s and there's a bunch of audience members who aren't, students here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it real easy and start, right from scratch, right? And see where we get up to in an hour and a half from now. So essentially, EDM drums or electronic dance music drums are obviously, as you know, incredibly important and can be quite painful to get right. Yeah, a lot of times we're struggling with, oh, my kick's not cutting through, oh, it's just not sitting right, etc., etc. So hopefully, I have a few tips and techniques, none of which are very hard to really grasp or execute. Yeah, and so it's just a bunch of things to be aware of and to approach and a way of approaching these techniques. And if you do so, chances are 8 times out of 10, 9 times out of 10, you're going to end up with drums that really cut through and really work with whatever style of electronic music that you're producing, that you're composing. Yeah? So obviously, we're going to be dealing with kicks, snares, claps, hi-hats, and then if we have some time, the other sort of secondary elements that that make up your groove, right? Some more interesting stuff. So I'm just going to get straight into it. Essentially, when we're talking about a kick, we're talking about a bunch of frequencies depending on what the kind of kick or style of kick it is as well. So I usually just classify them or break down the frequency spectrum of a kick into 3 categories, right? Which is your boom, right, or your sub set of frequencies. You've got the main body or snap of it, or the thud of it, and then there's the top end of a kick, which is your click, or sometimes it's a white noise, little on the higher end. So we have a bunch of printouts for those of you who came early and grabbed them. However, these printouts are from, you can grab them online. That's where I got them from. So if you just type in, kick frequency spectrum, you'll be looking at a whole bunch of images that sort of look like this. So what are we looking at over here? We're looking at an EQ, yeah, obviously. And what is this x-axis over here? Frequency, exactly, yeah. So from 20 hertz, obviously, to 20 kilohertz, right? So from low to high. And then the y-axis is decibels, right? So that's our line there, our 0 line. So if we're looking, if we start pulling stuff down, then we're cutting or attenuating, and then if we're putting it up, we're boosting, right? In decibels, yeah. So more importantly, as you can see, we're looking at your subset of frequencies that are somewhat over here till about 80, 70, 80. It all depends on what the pitch or the key of the frequency is as well, or the kick is rather. And then you're looking at your main body of the kick, or where all the energy lies, all the snap lies. And then finally, as I was saying over here, they're calling it slap or click or whatever you want to call it, that high end there, right? So it's this combination of frequencies that kind of separates one kick from another, yeah? obviously, it's also got to do with the type of waveforms that are used to create these kicks in the first place. Some kicks are more siny than others. Some have a lot of distortion. Some are very clean sounding, etc., etc. But once you have these combination of oscillators that come together in a certain way, it is predominantly this combination of how much sub, how little sub, that really defines what type of kick it is, right? And what you need. So this in a lot of cases, when you start a track, or the first thing you want to ask yourself is, what kind of kick do I need, right? A lot of times you'll make this decision on the style of electronic music that you're producing. Yeah, is it a hard-hitting style like dubstep or drum and bass, or glitch hop and other bass kind of bass music genres, or is it more mellow? Is it more chilled out, right? And immediately what you do is you narrow down the types of kicks that you're looking for. All right, so the first thing to getting a good kick sound is to get the appropriate sound. Yeah. And how many of you guys have been producing electronic music, some style of electronic music already? I'm sure more than, right? So like pretty much half the house over here, right? So a lot of these different types of kicks you would have heard already, but I'm gonna again, and this is you probably be able to classify it different. This is usually how I go about doing it. Clubby kicks, so electro kicks. Distorted kicks, sub kicks, trancey kicks, which is not too different from the electro, techno kicks, and then disco and more acoustic kicks. Right, so let's have a listen to some of these kicks here. All right, so let's start with I believe these are loops over here. But let's start with some of these more disco ones, right? So let's have a listen to this. Right? Let's have a listen to another loop here. Right, so that's a good example. Let's see if I have one that's just without the hats there. Right, let's hear one of these fatter disco ones. Here's a fatto disco. Right, so it's got a very live sort of quality to it. Yeah, you agree? Oops, sorry, 1 second. Let's get rid of this. There you go. Now let's compare these live disco kicks to a distorted kick, right? So obviously a huge difference there. And some electro kicks here. Right, and let's compare that to some of these kicks that you would use in minimal techno music. Right. So, do you guys hear a difference in the character immediately? Right. So, in case you're not familiar with a lot of electronic music styles, but are still, or you've just gotten into listening to electronic music or producing electronic music, I wouldn't even say that you need to worry about, this style of music has these kind of kicks and break it down like that, if that's a challenge for you, or if that's kind of confusing you. You could even choose the right kick based on the kind of mood that you want to create with your track. So if the mood is mellow, if it's relaxed, if it's chilled out, peaceful, however you want to say it, then you would use a warmer sounding kick. You would definitely wouldn't use those set of distorted kicks, would you? Right? So it's so that's how you can even look for the right kind of kick based on mood, right? And do it that way. Your question?
Check.
Yep.
So these kicks that you actually played for us, so the character differentiation was just because of the EQ, or there were any inserts or anything else that was working on?
Yeah, there would be a whole bunch of sort of but the distorted kicks obviously were distorted, so there was a lot of processing by just making it clip, essentially. So adding so much, harmonics and distortion to it that it's not very clear, right? So it's a combination of, yes, to answer your question, it's a combination of EQ and processing that go into shaping a kick. As I mentioned before, also a lot of times it comes down to the waveforms that you use, the oscillators that you use to create the kick. So if you use a whole bunch of just sine and triangle waves to create a kick, you'll have a kick that's very rounded and pure sounding, rather than as opposed to if you used a lot of square or saw kind of oscillators to create kicks, then you'll have something that's got a lot more meat in it, a lot more body in it, right? And a lot more harmonics in it. Okay. We seem to have. Oops, sorry. You want me to press the power button? Okay. Sure. Where is it? Sorry. Oh, cheers. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Hit that again. Switch it back on. Right, so let's hear a few more while that's happening there behind us. So let's hear some of these subby kicks, right? Okay, I heard that. So obviously a lot of subs there, right? And not a lot of clicks or anything on top as compared to these electro kicks, for example, right? Some of them, right? You see there's a hi-hat in there almost, right? If you can hear that, right? You hear there's like a hi-hat on the top end that's making up the click, and not as much sub as compared to, some of these subby sort of kicks over here. Yeah, so that's the next thing to be aware of, right? After your frequency spectrum, you want to look at your kick types. I'm just going to leave it here until this sort of powers up. Okay, cool. I'm just going to minimize that. Okay, let's just go for a display here where I can see something. Okay, sweet. All right, so let's, the next thing The next thing I want to talk about, let me just check my audio here real quick. That's good. And check my sound here. Output, there we go. Cool, okay. All right, so let's, so the next thing I want to talk about is, so essentially what we're doing is we're looking for an appropriate kick, and we're looking obviously at good samples, all right? So there's a bunch of, again, there's two ways of going about it. There's, if any of you have heard of this plugin called, not a plugin, but a VST called Kick by Nicky Romero, all right? So you're able to sort of synthesize your own kick. So this is what, so that'd be one thing to do. That's one approach to do, to be able to synthesize your own kick. So Nicky Romero's Kick makes it quite easy to do that. And he has a whole bunch of presets that you can load up and then tweak, right? But I'm not going to get into that. I'm going to keep it like real simple. I'm going to look at samples, right? Which I still prefer to do rather than synthesis, because it's much faster and it's more effective. Now, so the first thing, I have this random 128 BPM thing going on here. Right, so that's that. And let's go through some of these kicks. So what sort of kick would you think could work? Based like a sub kick? Okay. I would go more for like an electro sort of kick, because the sub will probably not have enough body on it and snap on it, right? So I would start by looking for a good kick, and then what I'm going to do is I want to make sure that so that's the song's in G, right? I'm a little blind over here because I can't hear any sub on anything on this over here, but I'll do my best here. All right, so I definitely hear some sub over there. So I want to maybe use that. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm looking for a full rounded kick. I want my sub, my boom, I want a lot of body, and maybe I want a little click on top as well, yeah? And that's what I'm looking for, and I'm looking for a good sample kick. A lot of these, a few companies make pretty decent samples, like Vengeance Sound, although some of their samples are like over compressed, so that can be a problem while on a mixing stage, on a mixing level. Besides them, there's Freaky Loops, there's Vandalism, which is really good as well, and who else? Well, there's a few. Sample Phonics and Sample Magic. So that's a few sort of companies you might want to check out. So what I'm going to do is, my song is in G, and I've picked a kick that I like, that could potentially work. All right. So what I want to do to begin with is make sure that my kick that I picked is in tune with the tonic of my key, which right. So I'm just going to put down the notes over here real quick, right? Oops. And just take the velocities full. Obviously, it's clipping there on my master, so I also want to take down this little thing here. So I'll just go to about 6 dB, minus 6 dB over here. So let's see what that sounds like. So it sounds okay, but I'm not really sure if it's in key or not, if the kick is in key or not, right? What do you guys think? Does that sound right to you? Say that again? What's masking what?
masking a little bit. I mean,
The what? Sorry?
synth, I guess.
The synth is masking it, yeah, because we just thrown that kick in, and we haven't done anything to it yet. So even if you pick the best kick that you have, it is probably going to create problems because we just thrown that in. If it was that simple, then yeah, we probably wouldn't be having this class. But essentially, it's not. I agree. It's not. There's something wrong with it, right? So essentially, what I want to do is I want to make sure that this kick is in tune to my music, right? So just by listening to this kick, because there's so much going on, it's not that easy to determine what the pitch is, right? So there's a few ways of going about how to solve that issue. One way is to throw it into a sampler like Battery or whatever sampler that you're using, and pitch it way up till it becomes like a tone, right? So if I pitch it, 24, and what I can do is if I open up EXS 24 and don't load anything, it gives me a sort of siny kind of sound, right? So let me just put down a note over here, which is in G, and then we'll see if we can tune it that way. Let's close that up here. So we'll just put down a note. Take that up to G, right? Maybe an octave up as well. And so now that's the note there. Let me just take the volume down before I play it. Ouch, right? Or maybe I take it down an octave. Right. And now I want to tune this kick to that same note, right? Right? So that's plus 30, plus 35. Now, math, which I'm excel at, right? So 12, 24, 34, 38, minus 1? Yeah, so minus 1, right? So basically, I'm just now going back to here, right? And that would be a G. Right? Right, so that's one way of doing it. But what happens if instead of it being minus 1, it was like plus 5 or plus 6? It's possible, right? It's probably minus 2 because most kicks you'll find are in A or E and not in sharps, right? So let's hear that. Can you guys tell? What do you prefer? Minus 2, minus 1? From what I can hear, I prefer minus 2. So that's one way of going about doing it. Yeah. Yeah, so if it's really siny, right, and there's not too much of distortion going on in the kick itself, then yes, you can use like an auto tune, or you could even by ear be able to figure it out, right? But this has so much going on, this kick. There's a lot of distortion in there, and there's a lot of bunch of frequencies where you can't decipher what the note is, right? So that's one way of doing that, but you're relying a lot on your ears, especially with something as dodgy as this. You could, even by pitching it way up, mess it up, right? So another way of doing this more sort of scientifically is by using a spectrum analyzer. All right. So this is span, right? And it's a free spectrum analyzer. What it'll do is it works a little bit better than an EQ. I can switch this thing off now. It works a little bit better than EQ, and it just analyzes what the frequency spectrum of any sound is, right? So I just want to go to the mode over here. I hope you can see that clearly. And then go to high resolution, right? That's high res here. And now just play back. So you can see it's analyzing it now. And if I just hit hold right there, it'll kind of take a snapshot or freeze on this image here. So now it's super easy to see what this is, right? What the pitch is. Because, so I just go to that attack right there, and right at the bottom here, if you guys can see that clearly, I don't know if you can, it says G sharp 1 minus 36 cents. So we got close with our ear, right? But not quite. Yeah? So according to span, I need to take, and this is, okay, so this is back, so -1. So our ears were okay. Right? And now we have a tuned kick, all right, to our music. Right? Sorry, I'm just going to mute that. Right? Let's compare quickly to... I know it's super hard to a -1 dB on such a distorted kick, but this is super, super important. Right? If you don't do this and get this right on your kicks and your snares, not so much, it depends. We'll look at that in a second. But definitely with your kicks, you could have the best sounding kick in the world. It's never going to sit right in your track. Yeah, any questions before we move on to the next bit? Yep.
So what if we tune the kick to the 5th of the key, basically?
Very good question. Perfect question. Yeah, I was just getting to this before my mind drifted somewhere else. So this is pretty easy, right? We ended up with picking a kick that we liked that was in G sharp, and our key was in G, right? So -1, we're not really affecting the sonic quality of the kick very much. But what if the kick that we liked was way off? We can't take it up +5 or -5. The kick will just, if you take it down -5, it'll sound like really sloppy and loose. And then if you take it up +5 or 6 or something, it's going to knock off all the sub off of it, right? So the rule is that if the kick, the tune of the kick, once you determine what the tune of the kick is, if it's very far away of the tonic, then tune it to the 5th.
Okay.
Yeah?
Thank you.
So that will work too, as well. In fact, a lot of times, especially with, a lot of distorted kicks or kicks with a lot going on, I don't know if I'm tuning to the tonic or the 5th with these kicks. I'll end up either on the tonic or the kick anyway. Or the tonic or the 5th anyway, yeah, with the kicks. So good question. So that will work perfectly well as well. So G, A, B, C, we could go to a D, right? So if you picked a kick that was an E, right? A lot of kicks you find are an E, then obviously you can't go up to the G. Just go down to D, and that'll work too. All right, so we've covered picking, a kick, covered the types of kicks that we find, right? And we've covered, obviously, tuning the kick, all right? So the next thing, if I go back to this little PowerPoint here. Yeah, go ahead.
So if you're basically the tuning of the drum should be in parallel with what's playing, what chord is playing, or should it be in the key signature of the song?
The key of the song. Yeah, right. Because you're going to start with that as the first chord. Yeah. So yeah, it can't. That would be insane. Yeah, it would be interesting, but yeah. All right. There we are. And why is this super slow over here? Hold on a second. Get rid of mirror displays here. Okay, good. Sorry, my laptop's sort of bugging out over here. I'm trying to figure it out. Come on, right. Okay, fine. Let's just keep it like this. Yeah, sorry about that. Right, so that was our tuning, right? Wake up. There you go. All right. So here are a few sort of tips to look out for to make them sit, to make your kick sit a little bit better. All right. So we're going to look at enveloper or a transient shaper, essentially mono versus stereo, a little bit of equalization as well, and parallel compression. All right. So. Let's pull that up there. Okay, let me just close this here. Okay, so for some reason, I can't seem to move beyond here if I go right. I have no idea what's going on. Hold on a second. Yep. Right. Can you just mute this output over here? I'm just going to do a quick restart, yeah? It's super buggy. Good? Okay. Any of you guys catch Azhar? Was it good? think it's the display. Every time I plug in, it gets a bit buggy. It's like it can't handle the load or something like that. See, if I unplug it, it's working fine. Yeah, let me just eject this hard disk over here, right? Let's see if that's better. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of freezing a little bit. No, I'm checking. It was fine yesterday. Okay. Let's just. It's not letting me do anything. It's kind of trying to connect to the display, but it's not being able to. Is there any other way instead of this of being able to project? Yeah, no, it's absolutely fine. It's only when I connect this up for some reason that it starts bugging out. Yeah, sure. Any other way?
And back to back.
I'm trying because it was happening yesterday as well, but then it would just take a second and then go out. You're seeing it's this? The connector itself?
I don't think so.
No?
Connector was working fine the whole.
Working fine, right?
Yeah, connector's working fine.
Okay. Sure. No, it's not connected though. Sorry? Yeah, no, I know, but every time I connect that, it freezes. Okay, sorry about that. All right, so we're back up here. We got our kick and tune. Yeah. Well, as one of you mentioned that the bass is getting in the way of the kick as well. So is that little chord thing. So how do we clean this up? So there's a few things that we can do. Okay, essentially one is something that I use a lot, and it's in how many Logic users in the house? Hands up, anyone not using Logic? There's a few of you, right? It could be, right, okay. So for those of you who aren't using Logic, just look for a transient, something called a transient shaper, right? I'm sure you're aware of it already. For Logic users, there's this thing called the envelope, which is essentially the same, more or less the same thing. So what this does is, as you can see, you've got this attack section here and this release section over here. So I usually adjust not just my kicks, but my snares and claps and stuff as well. So, for example, if I want more attack, I'll take that up. If I want less release, etc., etc. And also, this you can think of this as hold, right, or for an ADSR. So, so let's have a look. See if we can clean this up a little bit, right? I may have probably overdone it because I can't hear Jack on over here. But do you guys hear a difference if I A-B this? Yes? Yeah? All right. So essentially, we're doing a lot of horns over here on our kicks and sometimes on our snares and stuff as well. So this will help it pop out. But bear in mind that you do this, so I'll just A-B, and you have a look, see what's happening over here. It starts sort of... You see that? That's not the greatest thing in the world at a, for a mixing stage. So also it's cutting through more because it's also louder, right? So you might want to take it down a wee bit. Yeah? Let's hear that. Yeah? Okay, so that's your first thing. Now, the next bit would be your mono versus stereo thing. So this is, again, it's a subjective thing. There's no right or wrong when it comes to kicks in mono, bass in mono. It for me, it largely depends on what sounds good, what else is going on. Do you have like a mix or a track where there's a lot of elements going on, right? Well, then in that case, yeah, you're going to have to push your kicks and basses and and convert them to mono. But if there's not much going on, or even for some sometimes it's styles of music, right? Like dubstep will have like a really fat, quite a stereo sort of kick, yeah. But for me, like especially with this whole house EDM thing, I want to try and keep, as a rule, I want to try and keep both my kick and my bass as mono, right? Unless it's not working at all, in which case I'll use like a mix of it, right? So, as to see actually what's going on, if you go to metering here, and you got a multimeter, right? There's a meter over here, which will show you essentially, what's happening with this kick. So let's just have a listen to that, right? So it's pretty mono to begin with, right? What happens if I just convert that to mono and then have a relook at this over here? Let me just move this out of the way so we can see both. And I was able to somehow over here, but essentially it is that line's getting thinner and straighter, yeah? So you want that. I want that over here, right? Again, bypassed, and it's kind of spilling out slightly to the sides there. I don't want that. I want to keep it dead straight, yeah? So again, this depends on the style of music and what sounds good, how busy or not busy your elements are, etc. But yeah, I want to try and keep it as mono as possible. All right. Any questions before we move on? Straightforward. Yeah. Okay. So the last thing is this little EQ thing. All right. So as you know, you double click here and that opens up your channel EQ, right? But with your kicks and even basses or any other sort of low sounds, what happens is, especially with this logic built-in EQ, it sucks. Yeah. What it does is, if you cut somewhere, let's say I cut over here, I do that. What it's doing is it might not be just cutting there. It might be cutting here or boosting here, right? So there's essentially phase issues with this channel EQ in Logic and a lot of other EQs as well that come in other DAWs and other DAWs. So what you want to do is, and you don't want to mess with that, especially with electronic music and the kick. It's so important. So what you want to do is you want to go for a linear phase EQ, right? Yeah. It introduces latency into your session, so if you're not done producing and stuff, it can be a bit of a pain, right? So what I would say is make your adjustments, cut, boost, whatever you want to do, and then just bounce it to audio, so you can knock off that instance of the linear phase plugin, and all that latency has gone away. All right, so so let's have a look. See, now that we have a linear phase here, let's put an analyzer on and put it on high, and look, see what's going on with this kick, right? Right. And since this is a sample, what they've done is, as you can see, they've already cut a bit of sub over there. But I don't want to take any chances. What I usually do is I cut to about 30, sometimes even 35 hertz, right? And I'm good with that. If I want to adjust, I've picked a relatively good sample. Everything's cutting through fine. If I want to add, if I don't have enough click, then I can go and find the click and then again boost it. But when I do this, I say this in all my classes. So excuse me if you've heard me say this like 20 times before. But when you're boosting, try and do it harmonically, right? So if you pull up a frequency to pitch map, right, that you can easily find here. Let me say chart. So any one of these, it'll give you basically the frequency of each note, right? So we're in G, right? And let's say I wanted more clicks, so I'll be somewhere around here, either probably here, 6271, yeah? So I'll go back to my EQ and sort of zero that in, 6271. Logic's EQ sucks so bad that I can't even pick 6271. So you might want to use, I don't know if I have it on this laptop, but I usually use Q2 by FabFilter. Yeah, I have it here. So it's a much more transparent equalizer, and you can sort of zero in to exactly 6271, boost it there, right? So we do all of that, and obviously, so this is by default, like all EQs are, it has a zero latency over here. You click on that, and then you have this linear phase, and then you can even go to like maximum, very high. It's super CPU heavy, obviously. Yeah, so as I mentioned, just once you're happy with that sound, bounce it in place. A lot of people compress their kicks, right? Makes sense to compress it. Not so much for me, though. I mean, let me see if I can find the same kick here. But if you look at the, this is in a, let me put it up in battery over here. The thing's pretty much like maxed out already. Like, what am I going to compress over here? Right? So there's really no need to compress. What you can do is New York compression or parallel compression, right? So, which is a cool trick to make any, not just your kick, but any other elements that you want to pop out of your mix, such as a kick and snares do in electronic dance music, right? So what I do is I send to a bus and I make it pre-fader so that any volume changes here do not affect how much I'm sending over here. And then on the bus, let me just pull up another linear phase EQ here. I'm going to, whoops, that's not the shape I was looking for. I'm gonna pretty much put a high shelf here, like something super exaggerated like that, and then not affect anything else. Just make a hole there in the middle, right? Something like that. And I'll put any sort of compressor, any compressor that you like, right? So you can use Fab Filter again. Pull up any sort of bus compression sort of or mastering settings, right? So let's say that there. And I'm sending, and I'm just going to solo the bus that I send to. Make sure you don't overdo this. Sorry, anyone have a question? Okay, I'm just hearing things now. Sorry. So that's essentially what I'm adding to the mix, right? Obviously, this is super exaggerated. Can you hear that okay? Okay. So minus 30, good place to start. Just adds a little bit of extra oomph in your track. I'll exaggerate it. See how that's kind of flat, and then it adds that oomph, right? Yeah, everyone hear that okay? All right, so obviously that's super exaggerated, but I'd sometimes do this as well if I'm not getting enough sub, or especially for dubstep, drum and bass, more sort of harder hitting tracks, right? So that is all our kick stuff, right? So the next thing we're going to be looking at, or the next thing we need, is snares and claps, right? So again, I'm going to start with, let me just go to where my samples are, TSM, Masterclass, here we go. All right, so let's have a listen to some of these snares, right? So again, different people have different ways of like classifying their snares. A lot of, with certain drum kit sounds, right? An 808 snare, and how that's different than a 909, 707, 606, yada, 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 right? Lin drums, etc. So the way I do it is based on what the requirement is of your track, right? So you'd have a single hit sort of snare, or you'll have a layered snare. Yeah? You'd also have what I like to call, which is not a term, a reverb open or a reverb closed snare. And so let me just play some single hit snares, which would be, a lot like, like a drummer hitting a snare, right? So it's just a single hit. Right? So it's just one hit. If you open up, right? As opposed to a layered snare, which is a bunch of snares together, or maybe even claps, right? So it's got 3 or more layers on it. Okay. Now, also I mentioned reverb open, reverb closed. So let me just find one that's reverb closed. Right. So you see how there's like a full stop at the end, like the reverb tail is kind of almost like it's been faded out, and right, as opposed to some of these where you can still hear that reverb tail hanging. I know it's kind of hard because it goes by so fast, but let me find a good example here. Right there. I'll play that again. Or let me just throw it in here and we can solo it and hear it a few times. You hear that reverb tail? Yeah? So it's not coming back down. So a lot of times you're making decisions as to, do I want something that comes back down or that's closed, that reverb tail's closed, or do I want it open? Yeah? So a lot of times I make decisions like, based on that. Now, okay, so let's put down, it's the same with your claps as well. So I prefer layering, even if it's very, very low in the mix, my layers. I prefer keeping, one or like layering one or two kicks. If I can make something happen like with this, I don't really find the need to put another kick in there and start causing phase issues and things like that. So if I do, then I might get one additional kick in the mix. But definitely with my snares and claps, I want a lot of depth, because if you pick just one single hit snare sound, especially in a track like this, it's not going to sound, there's going to be no depth in your production, in your mix, all right? So I'm going to do it the same way. And again, if there's a lot of note in the snare that you pick, right? Claps doesn't really matter, but in the snare, if there's a lot of note in the snare that you pick, then again, you want to do the same tuning thing that we did earlier, right? So I'm just going to knock this off. Open up battery again. And I think a clap would be better in this case, considering the kind of music it is, so. I don't know. All right, so that's a pretty good one right there. So let's see if I can make this happen. As you can see, there's a lot going on here, right? There's at least 3 samples happening there. So let's see what it sounds like. Right, sounds a bit weird. I think it's, again, a tune thing. So I'm going to tune it way up again and see what's going on here. A spectral analyzer, what we did before with span, is not going to work this time, because it's just going to show a whole bunch of stuff, because it's so many different layers, right? So kind of do it by ear and see how we go. Right? So that sounds okay to me. But what's happening over here is I need to clean this up immediately. Yeah? Right? There's a lot of this low end happening, and it's sort of getting in the way now of my kick, right? So that seems all right. There's actually too much of this tonic over here. So I might want to do that. Let's see what that sounds like. So that's a little better, but it's still, again, getting in the way of my snare, right? Of my kick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play with, and you can do this in any sample of your choice, I'm going to play with the ADSR or the envelope of this, because I don't really want so much attack, right? Because it's got so much attack on it, it's eating up on the attack of my kick, right? Better, right? Yeah. So that's kind of important, right? Because everything's secondary. Obviously, with dubstep or drum and bass, for example, the snare is even more important than the kick, or as just as important as the kick. But with this, it's kind of secondary. So it has to sort of get out of the way. That attack has to get out of the way of the kick and make space for the attack of the kick. I can even, again, now explore, as you should do with this envelope here. So I often do this to just not so much the attack, because I've sort of taken it away. I won't be adding attack like we did with the kick, but I might want to play around and find the right time of my release. Again, what sounds good. So let's have a listen. that sounds okay to me. I might want to come back later and adjust it, at least based on what I'm hearing. Right. Now, as I mentioned, so I've used a layered, a layered snare and clap, but I don't necessarily have to stop there, right? I can layer on top of layers. What I want to do is use this whole Haas effect idea for a bit of stereo widening, right? Essentially. So again, another instance of battery here, real quick. Here we go. And let's find some interesting sounds that we can layer with now. So I'm looking for like a variation in sound here. I don't want to pick a snare or a clap like the one I have already, but something that is different from it and complement it, right? So that's quite different from what I have. It's more of a clap sound, right? And let's try and find one more interesting one here. Okay, not that, because we already have something like that. Yeah, so the sort of drum machine kind of. Right, so there's a variation sound there. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to pan them hard left and right here. Yeah. Just copy over the programming. So that's my first layer there. And then I have my second layer there, all right? But now what I want to do is I want to create a time difference here, okay? So maybe these guys here, they're slightly before, and these other guys here, the second set of sample is a little bit after. So you can do this by, you can do this musically as well, in the sense that it could be like 192 before 192. It's up to you, right? I mean, it goes by so fast, you can't really tell the difference, or at least I can't. But let me try that. And it's quite extreme, but let's see what that sounds like. Again, I'm clipping, so I'm going to take this down. And obviously not as loud as our main snare clap layered sample. Yeah, so let's have a listen to this. Right, so I'm going to get more extreme over here with these so that I can hear this sort of flammy kind of sound. Let's see if that works. And the second one could come up in level as well. It's quite quiet. So I'll just take it up from here. Let's hear that. Right, that's a little bit more balanced. Let's hear this now. Right, so you hear that together, working together. I'll get rid of the new layer. Maybe too loud. And let's listen. Yeah? Any questions? Simple? Yeah? All right. Again, now with the whole mixing of it, I usually find that, especially with these samples, I'm using a lot of these Vengeance samples, by the way, which, again, sound great by themselves, but I think they sort of overdo it most of the time. Like with this, there's a lot of harsh highs here. Right? So, and with these, it's kind of the same thing. So I usually tone it down, but it depends, again, largely also on what else is happening, you know, musically with the other musical elements, right? if you want them to pop, then again, the whole idea of the whole parallel compression trick sometimes also works. Not so much with this kind of music, but again, dubstep, drum and bass, a lot of parallel compression will do the job as well. Yeah. Okay. Let me just pull this up. All right, okay, so I skipped one bit, which is kind of important. This whole idea, again, going back to the kick, I forgot to mention this. A lot of people layer their kicks, right? Yeah? I'm sure you guys have as well. Yeah? Like one kick doesn't do the job, and you layer it. But the problem with that is that you have a lot of phase cancellation. So when you are doing this layering thing, bounce to audio. Like, okay, so let's, and again, make sure that when you start adding kick layers, that the layers are tuned as well. So if the kicks aren't tuned together, again, it's going to sound rubbish, right? Yeah? So let's find, so we've got this one kick over here, right? So I'll just call this kick main or something, right? And then we'll find a layer over here. And that'll be our kick layer. Yeah. Yeah, I'll actually just, oh yeah, I'll need that. Okay. Let's load up battery before we go hunting for another kick. Kick. Here we go. Let's go some of these trance ones because they might have like a really resonant high end. Not that one. I've marked a few here. Let's have a listen to these. Okay, yeah, so say I wanted to use just that click of this one, right? Oops, something soloed. Right. So just copy that over. That's already named. And say I like that little click on top, right? And I want to use just that. So obviously the first thing you would be doing is opening up a linear phase EQ and knocking off everything but that, right? So that you don't have any conflict with the kick that you already have, because you like the sub of the kick, you like the body, you just want the click of this one. So let's find that. Say I just want that, right? Now let's have a listen to our main kick there. All right, let's see what span comes up with. All right, so that's saying G, so we're good, yeah? You think it's helping in any way? So that's without and with. Not really, right? It's doing something funny as well. Like even though you've put an EQ over here and cut it out, it's still, so it's not canceling at the bottom. But if you want to do stuff like this, and I'm not saying layering is wrong or something. Try and avoid it because it's painful, right? So I'll just call this kick main. If you want to layer, you want to bounce everything in audio and like ensure that these guys don't overlap, right? So I'll call this kick click, right? Wow, look at that, nice. Does this happen in Pro Tools as well? Like just what just happened over here seems to have like knocked off. Like if I look at the waveforms, sometimes these waveforms are different. So essentially, I'm just going to use one of these samples here. Right? And with each of them, I'm going to see if I can shorten it here. Yeah, that's good enough. Just knock that off and have a listen to that. And I can copy all this now. Because if the waveforms start overlapping, then what starts happening is that in places they might cancel each other out. Like you'll notice that one of them is on the the cycle on top and the other one at the bottom. So right at that instance, they'll cancel each other out. So, and this is not such a big deal because I was looking for a click, but what if I was adding a sub? Like, can you imagine the damage it would do in that case? Like if I was adding a sub layer, if I picked a kick that didn't have enough sub, then I'm like, okay, I'm going to add a layer now with just that sub boomy part. And I don't do this. And the sub is overlapping into my main kick, my snap kick, or rather the snap kick is also phasing with the sub. I'm creating even more chaos than I'm actually doing, my kick or my track any good, right? So this is an important thing that slipped my mind earlier to mention that with snares and things like that, it's not such a huge issue, and you'll be playing with the ADSR anyway. But with kicks, just ensure if you are using layers that you do this. You bounce in, make sure that you don't have any phase canceling going out. Cool? All right. So let me just go back here. Because as usual, we're running out of time. So I'm just going to go back to this little PowerPoint here and see if we can jump. All right, yeah, okay. So with claps, right? A lot of times it's kind of like the same Haas effect thing that we did. We add a sample that's a little bit before the occurrence of the clap on the 2 and 4, and then maybe one that's a little bit after. You also sort of get these pre-generated, pre-shifted claps, right? A lot of times, which which have a certain ms of delay in them. So again, this is Vengeance. As you can see, VDH there, and right. So if you're using these sort of pre-shifted claps has a real good effect in terms of groove. All right. So explore this sort of time difference, right? It humanizes your track, right? Because like if you meet the tightest drummer in the world, that drummer will be like slightly behind the beat, won't be bang on the beat, and that effect is musical, is what we like because it's very human, right? So so pre-shifting your claps, just like the way we did it, is something that that will benefit our tracks. We also have, like in this case, a lot of sample companies or sample libraries that pre-ship claps, and then you just have to pick one which is the right that works for you in terms of how long or short it is. So there's a calculation from BPM to MS conversion, right? What is it? 60,000 divided by BPM gives you a quarter note. Is that right? Yes. Okay. Yeah. So you can do it that way. So if you're a BPM 128, so divide 60,000 by 128, and that'll give you a quarter note millisecond delay. So you can do it that way. You can do it in a musical way as well, and then keep dividing that to get 8 notes, 16 notes, etc., etc. Yeah. Okay. I'm just going to quickly go through this and see what we can skip and what we should address. Right, just like with the snares, even with our claps, we want to ensure that we're using the sampler to adjust the attack, decay, sustain, right? Flamming manually versus pre-shifted, and we did the stereo widening over here, right? Hats, they're not too much of a, so I'm just going to talk about it really. Maybe there's things that we already, using samplers. I find that with most hi-hats, because we're not synthesizing and stuff, and we're relying on a lot of these sample packs that, over-compress and add a lot of harmonic distortion to samples, that they sound great by themselves. Like if you just audition a bunch of open or closed hi-hats, they sound really cool, right? They sound really full. However, they don't, they contain a lot of harsh highs, right? So you want to do a frequency sweep and find those harsh things in the high end and knock those off. All right. So it is bright, but it's not harsh. Quite often, I end up struggling with that. I'm constantly, looking to do that. Again, from a programming point of view, we need to adjust our velocities and swing for when we're programming hi-hats. Yeah, because if we don't then we end up getting something that's very mechanical and robotic. Right, and obviously EQ off any low end, any unwanted frequencies. Coming back to the snare clap thing as a last thing that I want to talk about, which is kind of important, is you want to make sure that, like in a track, you'd have your kick, which is prominently the most prominent instrument, and then you'd probably in an EDM track traditionally have a lead sound as well, right? At some point there'll be a lead. So you want to ensure that these snares and claps and layers and whatnot don't interfere with that. So I'm just going to name this here so I'm going to confuse snare, and then this is clap layers. Yeah. So by which I mean I'm going to have a look at what's happening EQ-wise, if I can pull this up. Right. And let me pull up, excuse me, let me pull up, if I can, channel EQ as well, play and see what's happening with the kick over here, which is on our right, and the clap layers. So for example, there's a lot of content on our kick here, around 5K, right? Right? All that. And that's the same over here as well. So I might want to tone that down, right? Because then I'll be able to hear my kick better as well. Right? And I'm going to go back to the snare. I'm going to do the same thing on the snare over here, right? So, or if that's an issue, which it does sound like it is, right? So. So I think I might want to even increase my clap layer there. I want to go in and make this a bit longer. I think we can afford to do that.
So instead of the transient shaper, could we just use the EQ and boost the resonance, or like just boost certain areas? Because then Ableton doesn't have that feature of the transient shaper thing. So.
But you can like throw it in Simpler and play with the ADSR or Simpler or Sampler. They both Simpler and Sampler have an ADSR, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can throw it in. Essentially, what we're doing is the boosting and cutting. It's not going to be as effective, right? We're talking about, so essentially when we're mixing, right, we're looking for pockets, right, based on BPM, based on whatever else is happening. These, and we have to fit all our stuff into these pockets, like jigsaw puzzles, right? So if, let's say, the tail of some kick is too long, EQing it is still, the tail is still going to be long, you just won't be able to hear it, etc., right? We have to make that tail shorter so that when the bass comes back, then that kick tail is gone, etc., Do you know what I mean? So it's essentially playing with the envelope of the sounds and making them as long and as short according to your BPM, according to whatever else is going on, trying to find these pockets of sound and placing them as perfectly as possible in them.
So you wouldn't recommend boosting or like cutting it? Like you
I never recommend boosting on like never, because boosting just causes problems, man.
Okay.
Like boosting is a bad scene. Unless it's, unless you end up with some, really shitty recording that you can't re-record or something, then you have to do whatever you have, what you can. But the boosting won't solve the issue. If I have a snare, and that snare's attack is too hard, right? Wherever I cut on my EQ, that it's still going to be hard, right? Even if I take that fundamental way down, it's still going to be hard. But if I play with the envelope of that sound and make that attack a lot more gradual, by the time that by the time the snare comes down, the kick's hit and already gone away. Do you know what I'm saying? So that's the idea.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
We can sidechain. Sidechain helps as well. Like this bass over here has already been sidechained. If you, right? So yeah, obviously you can sidechain, but like even with sidechain, right? As this bass is, I don't know if this is. Let's have a listen. Yeah. So they're both sidechained, but minus what we did. Let me go back over here and let's put the envelope off, right? I'll just bypass it and let's A/B it, right? Off. On. Do you hear a difference? Yeah. So sidechain, that's I mean, obviously we'll do that, but the envelope or just the ADSR thing is a good way of sort of getting that extra punch, or the other way around. Any more questions before we wrap up? Because I think that's time. Yeah, that's exactly 9. Yep. Sure, of course, yeah.
What's your take on like having a mid side on the drum bus? So you keep the low ends much more focused and the sides much more like they can, like you can still work around with the sides, but you can have the mids much more focused. So would you do that? Like,
yeah, good question. Look, I'm not a professional mix engineer, and there's, as far as when I speak to colleagues and the people that I know, there are these two schools of thought. One is completely against MS, in general, because they're like, oh, a lot of phase issues, which it does have. And then there's one that really exploits it and uses it to good effect. I've tried my hand at like MS as well. But so are you saying just MS EQ on the bus or MS compression?
yeah, just keeping the mids focused, like low cutting using sides and just low cutting.
Low cutting
so
it?
you'll just keep
Yeah.
the mids much more focused.
Not on the drum bus though, right? On the main,
On the
yeah,
main.
on the stereo out, yeah.
Yeah.
I would do that, yeah.
Okay.
I would do that for sure, yeah. You don't, because even no matter how much you cut and EQ and stuff, there'll still be that spillage of the low end. So a lot of times I'll like compress down my my mids as well, like slight compression and then leave the sides kind of open as well. So not so much with dance music, because I like to have like a more open feel with the dance music thing, but like a lot of pop rock stuff, if I end up unfortunately mixing it, then then I do like compress down, because it, you know, that compression in just the mid gives you that extra focus as well. Yeah. Any questions? Okay, yeah, we kind of ran out of time with the whole hats. But yeah, thank you for coming. Cheers, guys. See you soon. Bye-bye.